As an outspoken critic of 80-10-10, I do tend to get a lot of people coming to me after having been on the program for several years, describing the problems they've run into despite doing the diet supposedly perfect, as everyone criticizes them of having not done. But in this video I'm just going to discuss some of the ways in which you can transition out of eating that way and have a more broad-ranging perspective on diet without being so narrow-minded and orthorexic. Hello kindred longevity lifestyle designers, this is Zach with secretsoflongevity.com. There is a new term for an eating disorder. There's actually two new ones. Everyone's familiar with the term orthorexia mostly. That's the obsessive focus on eating exclusively healthy foods to the point where you keep restricting yourself so much that you're actually deficient in nutrients, essential factors, and also in some cases calories. There's also something called selective eating disorder, which is when you eat from one or just a few narrow types of foods. It could be obviously any level of variety of foods, but it's actually a fear of eating other foods for various reasons. In one sense, because those other foods that you might eat from might make you sick very quickly. So we see a reflection of both those types of eating disorders in many different types of dietary paradigms. I'm not just meaning to pick on 80-10-10 here, but I do happen to have recently been getting an increased number of people coming to me asking me about how to transition out of that way of eating because they've been on it for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, even 8 years is what I've been hearing from certain people who've been eating this way and are actually finally coming to the point where they're actually acknowledging the damaging effects it's having on them, despite the fact that they're eating all ripe fruit, making sure that they get enough sleep, making sure they get enough water, etc., according to that system's ways of eating. There is no perfect dietary system that can work for everyone on the planet. We just have to acknowledge that. No one succeeded in that. If humans were a one diet species, we'd all be eating it just like all horses eat hay and other herbaceous plants. Humans have evolved in a unique way over across the whole span of the globe, eating different foods, and thus genetically and a number of other factors have resulted in different nutrient needs for unique body types, unique gland dominance, and unique biochemistry, and also environmental and lifestyle needs. This is all going to affect one's dietary needs. Of course, there's going to be foods that are damaging to anyone who eats them. That's generally going to be in the processed food category, or foods that aren't processed properly. So there's two ends of the spectrum there. There's foods that are over-processed and there's food that aren't processed enough. So that comes into play like grains and things that have anti-nutrients that need to be taken out, because long-term use of those will in fact cause deleterious effects on the body. And this is just simple biochemistry that we can read about if we want to learn more about that. So a common complaint is adapting to a little bit more fat in the diet. If you've been eating a diet that is so rich in carbohydrates that you basically don't have the use of certain other enzymes and probably bioproduction and things to assist you in the digestion of these things, you need to take things slowly. I don't recommend sudden shifts in any way for any type of diet, any type of transition, unless it's really critical and you're being overseen by a qualified healthcare practitioner or in a sort of consultation type setting or a center that is familiar with the detoxification or changes that will happen during that process to better handle that person's transition. So gradually adding in things, depending on where you're wanting to go with your transition, it could be simply adding in some cooked starches if you're still wanting to be vegan and you need to just add in some things like sweet potatoes and all that. I mean, there's lots of information out there on how to do that. Just again, always take things slowly. There's adding in things like avocados, coconuts. I don't recommend adding in tons of nuts and seeds, of course, because of the high amounts of polyunsaturated fats. And even then, I'd say go more towards the coconuts because the saturated fats are more balanced and helpful for the body than too many polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats, which can be damaging to the thyroid and other things of that nature. Then you're going to, if you're open to going vegetarian, I'd probably suggest doing that before going omnivorous. If you ever intend to go back to eating meat, which you don't have to, certain people do have the metabolism where they need that, and you might eventually get there. But I've got a video here you can check out if you want to learn more about how to do a vegetarian diet properly in a way that is balanced, from my opinion, which is going to include, some raw dairy of various types, probably some pasture-raised organic eggs from a local source. It can include all manner of different animal foods, as well as a certain amount of plant foods. But there's going to be plant foods you want to probably stay away from as well, as they generally have, like I mentioned, those anti-nutrients and other things which can be deleterious in the long run. Especially if you're coming off this with teeth problems, which is so common, it's unbelievable, despite the claims of people saying, I've never heard of anyone getting teeth problems when they're eating ripe fruit. Obviously, if you think that, you're not looking at the people with a critical eye and a non-judgmental, non-biased way who are coming off that, and you're just dismissing them because of, they didn't sleep for 1 extra hour a day or some other ridiculous reason that is really nitpicky, and would probably fall under the classification of being in that selective eating disorder or orthorexic mindset, where everything outside of your frame of reality is completely 100% toxic and cancer-causing, and then what you do is perfect and the holiest and the most perfect way of doing things, and everyone else is wrong. That's pretty much what it comes across to everyone else, so just wanted to throw that out there. So gradually adding these things back in, if you've had a very expanded stomach from eating a high volume of food, obviously fat and protein-rich foods are going to be more condensed in size, and our guts are actually designed to eat more foods like that because they've shrunk over many hundreds of years, many thousands and millions of years of evolution from the time when we were apes and we had probably guts 2 to 3 times as large. Look at the pot belly on a gorilla or a chimpanzee if you think that humans are exactly like apes. They're simply not. Anyways, making sure you're consuming plenty of vegetable matter, very rich in fiber, so greens, peppers, tomatoes, all these sort of very low-calorie fruits and vegetables that are very fibrous will help keep your digestive system bulked up, so you don't have that feeling of a lack of bulk, which can be a problem that some people run into. Then you also want to, like I said, add in those foods slowly. You might want to look into certain supplements or superfoods that can be beneficial in remineralizing the body, remineralizing the teeth. I've got a great video here if you want to learn more about remineralizing the teeth, but the 2 supplements I highly recommend anyone coming off of veganism, raw veganism, even vegetarianism, going to omnivorism to take to really replenish those stores of retinol, which is the preformed vitamin A, not just the beta-carotene, which is only found in plants. There's no vitamin A actually found in plants, it's only the beta-carotene, which in a great number of people is not converted readily to vitamin A in a sufficient amount, so that can lead to vitamin A deficiencies. Then you're also going to be looking for foods that are rich in vitamin D3 if you're the type of person that doesn't readily convert sunlight to the D3 in the skin. There are actually vegans out there who have to take D3 supplements because they don't convert it. I've met many of them. There's some famous ones in the limelight who have to take vitamin D3 despite living in a place like Florida. Then you've also got your vitamin K2 and even K1 that you're going to be needing to get from animal foods. You can get K1 from plant foods, but again, if you've been raw vegan and you're not necessarily getting all the nutrients you can from fibrous food because of the fiber, and it's raw, it's all locked up in there, and a lot of it does just end up going right through you. Cooking your food, starting to add in some of that cooked food, adding in both cod liver oil and butter oil, which are those 2 supplements that are great for that transition. Adding in fermented foods, fermented animal foods is a very big thing, such as raw yogurt, raw kefir, hard cheeses. You also want to look at adding in the sauerkrauts and fermented vegetables, as there's a bit of fear around those as well. And just getting that whole body ecology back into shape by doing these things. Another big factor, if there's been issues with libido that has dropped off, which is extremely common as well. 2 biggest things that seem to be happening in that transition, or long-term staying on a restrictive diet, that is a raw vegan diet essentially, and transitioning back into omnivorism, is that people have had teeth problems and had the libido problems, despite, people who do eat that way who seem to not have those problems, and that's totally fine. If you're eating that way and you don't have those problems, just disregard what I'm saying, but there are people who get them. We have to acknowledge that. So adding in cholesterol-rich foods like the eggs, looking at red meat when you get to a point where you might add that back in is very boosting to testosterone. It gives you that readily available cholesterol, which is completely usable by the body in the manufacturing of hormones to really strengthen that endocrine system functioning. And then you also want to look at perhaps some herbs that will help bring those levels of libido, endocrine strength, and even help you in alleviating things like depression with the increase in the endocrine response. So it could be pine pollen, which is obviously vegan because it's from a plant, the pine tree. You could always take that. There's a new source for the Thrival's pine pollen, has a much better taste. You can find that in the links below. You could also try Tomcat Ali, which is one of the most potent testosterone-raising herbs. I've got that in the link below. If you've had a lot of muscle wasting and other things and you want to really ramp up the androgenic side of things, or the growth side of things, you could also use elk antler or colostrum, which you can also find at the Thrival link below. So those are just a couple things to help sort of rev the engines and really get you back into that place that you probably want to get back to at this point after having been sort of on a deficient path for as long as you have been. So always keep an open mind with any health program you're following. Don't be afraid to pick and choose different elements from different things and experiment. See what works for you. Always experiment from one thing at a time is really the way to go, so that you know if your body's changing in a good way, or if you're adding too many things in, it's going to be possibly a problem because you're not adapting necessarily to any one thing. It could be the combination of things where you just don't know what's working and what's not. So always take things slow, cautious and steady, and keep an open mind. So with that, let me know what you think in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't done that before, and I'll talk to you next time. Take care and embrace life without limits.